Our next two readings are from the teachings of the New Church, from the part of the book Arcana Celestia that explains the inner meaning of our reading from chapter 14 of Exodus. This first reading explains that the wanderings of the children of Israel represent temptations. And then it says, members of the Lord's spiritual church underwent temptations in order that they might be prepared further for heaven. For through temptations, through them as the one and only means, forms of good and truths are corroborated and joined together. Through them, charity becomes the charity that goes with faith, and faith becomes the faith that goes with charity. The fact that those who belong to the church must undergo temptations is what one should understand by the following things that the Lord said. In Matthew, whoever does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. In the same gospel, he said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. In Luke, whoever does not take up his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. In Mark, Jesus said to the rich young ruler, come, follow me, taking up the cross. And in Matthew, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. And our final reading explains the inner meaning of the statement, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord means salvation from the Lord alone and not from themselves. It's said here that people should faithfully believe that salvation comes from the Lord alone and not at all from themselves, because this is the chief thing to be believed in temptations. The person who believes when he is tempted that he has strength of his own with which he can offer resistance goes under. The reason for this is that he is subject to a falsity that leads him to ascribe merit to himself. And in doing this, he claims that he accomplishes his salvation, in which case he shuts out influx from the divine. But the person who believes that the Lord alone offers resistance in temptations is victorious, for he is guided by the truth and ascribes merit to the Lord, and he perceives that his salvation is accomplished by the Lord alone. A person whose faith is bonded to charity ascribes salvation wholly to the Lord and not at all to himself. Amen. One of the things that people most often ask the Lord for is protection from evil. Every time we say the Lord's Prayer, we say, deliver us from evil. And of course, he answers that prayer. He's our Father. He's our Savior. His whole job is to make us safe. But it's not always easy to see how his protection works. Evil certainly gets to us sometimes. Last week I talked about the Lord's unfailing respect for our freedom. He'll never overturn or disregard a choice that we've made, even if it's a really bad choice. So if we're choosing evil, well, he wants to protect us from evil, but he has to protect our freedom first. But what if we're not choosing evil? What if we're praying, Lord, take me away from this? Remember, he won't undo any choice that we've made, which means that he won't undo any choice that anyone makes either. If someone chooses to cause us harm, he won't reach in and overturn that choice. But he also made us such that nobody can hurt what we really are. Nobody can touch our spirit. That belongs to us and us alone. Surely, if we don't want evil to be present with our spirits, then he won't allow it to be present. Surely that's a prayer that he'll answer. To keep things simple, I'm going to be focusing on only one aspect of deliverance from evil, which is the most important aspect. I'm going to be talking about evils that have been part of our lives that we now want to be free from. These are evils or bad habits or selfish patterns that we've chosen. And maybe we weren't thinking clearly, maybe we didn't know what we were doing, maybe we were compelled by feelings that we couldn't control, but still, one way or another, to one degree or another, these are things that we've chosen, and now we want to unchoose them. We've recognized that they cause pain. And so we say to the Lord, I don't want this anymore. Deliver me from this evil. What happens then? There are three main points that I want to make about our deliverance from evil. The first and the most important is that the Lord, beyond a shadow of a doubt, has the power to protect us from evil. And more than anything, He wants to make us safe. He is the good shepherd who gives his life for the sheep. He'll never run when the wolves come. He's willing to guard us with his whole being, and no evil can stand before him. The second point is that sometimes we have to wait. Sometimes our deliverance takes longer than we perhaps think it should. And that's not because the Lord is busy or because He's unable to help us any faster. It's part of the plan. It's part of the process. And the third point is that in the meantime, we have a job to do. We've got to just keep going in the direction that the Lord told us to go. To bring all of these 3 points together, our deliverance from evil is like the sunrise. And sometimes we've got to walk all night to get to sunrise, but the sun will rise. And that's what we see in that story of the crossing of the Red Sea. The story is about the Lord saving His people. And one of the overwhelming feelings from the story is a feeling of awe at the power of the divine. The Lord works a miracle to protect His people, and it's unstoppable. But it takes all night. Don't often picture the crossing of the Red Sea taking place at night, but if you look closely at the story, that's what you'll see. When the pillar of cloud and fire moves to stand between the Egyptians and the Israelites to keep them separated, we read that it was a cloud and darkness to the one and gave light by night to the other. And in the next verse we read, the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night. And so the moment of the Egyptians catching up with the Israelites is happening sometime close to the beginning of the night. The wind that parts the waters blows all night. And the closing of the waters coincides with the coming of the morning. We read that in the morning watch, the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and He troubled the army of the Egyptians. The morning watch would be the last watch of the night, the last hours of darkness. And it's when the morning breaks that the sea returns to normal and the Egyptians are defeated. So the Lord saves His people, but they have to walk all night across the bottom of the sea. And the lesson says that the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And think about that. Think about those towering walls of dark water close by on either side. What would those waters have sounded like? As far as we know, the only light that the children of Israel had was the pillar of fire behind them. So there would have been nothing but pitch blackness up ahead of them. Would have been a long, frightening walk. And yet this is a story of the Lord saving his people. In the internal sense, this story is about a temptation. That word temptation gets used fairly broadly to describe any sort of a struggle against evil, but its proper meaning is specific, quite specific. A temptation means a test, a testing of our loves. It's an hour of truth in which good and evil loves within us come face to face and join in battle, and one side or the other gets defeated. So that matches the set of circumstances I described earlier, in which we've recognized an evil in ourselves, an evil that we've chosen, and now we want to unchoose it. But a temptation is more serious than just a tension between good and evil inclinations. Temptation is more than a passing wish that we could be free of some part of ourselves that we don't like. Over and over through our lives, good loves and evil loves in us will skirmish and then retreat, with both sides remaining more or less intact. A temptation is not a skirmish, it's a battle in which there is a winner and a loser. Something good that we love is getting tested against something evil that we love, and one side or the other is going to lose a measure of power over us. So temptations are tough, but they're also our truest opportunities for deliverance from evil. Because if we're victorious in temptation, then evil loses power over us. And that's why it said in that first reading from Arcana Celestia that those who belong to the church must undergo temptations. In order to be regenerated or reborn, we have to conquer that old self. The Lord told us to take up our cross, and that cross represents temptation. On the cross, the old self dies and a new self is born. Temptations are hard, but they're the gateway to the liberation and the life that the Lord wants to give us. But, of course, our spirits can't change except in freedom. If temptations are going to change us, then we have to take ownership of that change. If some old or evil or selfish part of us is going to be driven to the shadows, we have to choose to reject it. And that's why the Lord doesn't allow anyone to enter into temptations before they're ready. If we're going to overcome in temptation, we have to be prepared to exert powerful effort and make a powerful commitment. If we're not willing to try with everything that we've got, the Lord withholds us from temptation. Our involvement in our own battles against evil is real and it's essential. And yet, as we heard in that final reading, it is the Lord alone who saves us. He alone can conquer hell. And if we try to do it without him, then we're looking for strength where there is no strength. When we're choosing between good and evil, hell wants us to choose evil. They want our good loves to lose. They're not neutral parties here. They've got a stake in the outcome. And so they rise up against us. They make it as hard for us as they can. They fill our minds with doubt, with lies. And that's what that Egyptian army in the story represents. The Israelites had been slaves to the Egyptians, and now they're trying to break free, and the Egyptians don't like that. So they go after them to make them slaves again. And to do that, they bring a huge army, a terrifying army. There's no way that the Israelites could fight it. Just the same way, we can't expect to stop hell. Trying to hold back hell all by ourselves is like trying to hold back the ocean with just our bare hands. We can't do it. And that's why Moses tells the children of Israel, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall keep silence. The victory is always the Lord's. He alone can save us. If we try to claim what belongs to him, then we crowd him out of our lives. He is our Savior, and our job is to let him save us. Our job is to hold fast to faith in him. He will deliver us from evil if we put our trust in him. But trusting in him means doing as he says. Doesn't mean throwing up our hands and say, okay, fine, Lord, you do it your way. Doesn't mean sitting at the side of the sea and helplessly watching the Egyptians bear down. We have to do something. We have to play an active part in this process. We have to take ownership of something. The children of Israel had to walk across the bottom of the Red Sea on their own feet. And more to the point, they had to walk where the Lord told them to go. They had to just keep on obeying him. Just keep on putting one foot in front of the other, and they had to do that all night. When we're trying to overcome or escape from something dark within ourselves, obeying the Lord's commandments is not going to bring us joy. It's probably going to feel like drudgery. Probably going to feel like it does nothing to change the darkness within us. But if we're going to overcome, we have to put our faith in the Lord. And that means walking as he told us to walk. It means holding fast to his word, faithfully obeying his commandments. We might have to go on like that for a long time. We might have to go on joylessly for longer than we think we can. And that's because the part of us that the Lord is trying to save was in hell. And that part of us has to walk all the way out of hell. That part of us has to walk all the way across the bottom of the Red Sea. And we've got to do it on our own feet. We've got to do it at our own pace. The Lord could fly us out of hell, but there'd be no victory in that. The whole point of a temptation is to give us the opportunity to choose that we will do what it takes to side with what is good. That long walk out of darkness, step by step, can stretch on and on. But the sun will rise. It's hard to see that the morning is coming when it's night and you're at the bottom of the ocean. But the morning is always coming. The morning is the Lord himself, and hell cannot face him. Hell shatters and melts before him. That reading from Exodus suggests that the sunrise and the collapsing of the waters, and thus the Egyptians' final defeat, all coincide exactly. We read, "And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, as the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. The end of temptation really is like sunrise. It's something good, something entirely not our own that breaks forth all around us, and the darkness cannot withstand it, and our spirit is set free. So the message in all of this is that if you're going through a hard time, keep going. And more exactly, if you're going through a hard time, trust in the Lord and keep going where He said to go. Keep on doing what He said to do. Obeying Him isn't going to drive the night away all at once. But if we commit to the course He gives us, we will overcome. The night will end. The sun will rise. He will deliver us. I want to close with a reading from Psalm 46, the psalm from which this morning's recitation was taken. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. There is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. The nations raged. The kingdoms were moved. He uttered His voice. The earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Amen.